Oh, hello world, what is up? Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Matt Forte, and we are here live at the Build Studio in New York City. This year marks the 50th anniversary of what is arguably man's greatest achievement to date, the first manned lunar landing. Now, in celebration of this momentous occasion, National Geographic's Apollo Missions to the Moon premieres Sunday, July 7th at 9/8 Central, featuring newly transferred film and never-before-heard audio to tell the story of all 12 crewed Apollo missions. Joining me here in just a moment, executive producer and director of Apollo Missions to the Moon, Emmy and Peabody Award-winning filmmaker Tom Jennings, and former NASA astronaut and senior advisor at the Intrepid Museum, the great Mike Massimino is here. Guys, how about some noise for these guests? This is insane right now. Incredible filmmaker, a man from space. I'm excited. We're going to bring him out in just a moment. But first, I believe we have a trailer for the film, so let's go ahead and run that clip.
Would you like to live on the moon?
Yes, I would.
You would. You'd like to be one of the first people to go?
Yes.
We have one of the most challenging assignments that has ever been given to modern man.
The United States Man in Space program is at least 8 months behind that of the Soviet Union.
Now it is time to take longer strides. Time for this nation to take a clearly leading role in space achievement.
It's there. We'd be neglecting our duties as people if we didn't try to investigate it.
Oh, God, look at that picture over there. There's the Earth coming up. Wow, that's pretty.
You well may be the first man on the moon. How do you personally feel about it?
Well, I have the same desires as all the astronauts. We'd all like to make that trip.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Liftoff. Roger, liftoff. Rocket has cleared the tower, and there she goes on her way to the moon.
Houston, you're a go for landing, over.
They should be within 5 miles of their landing point.
How's our margin looking, Bob?
They're going in.
2,000 feet, picking up some dust. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
We copy you down, Eagle.
Houston, we've had a problem.
We got more than a problem. Okay, stand by, 13. We're looking at it.
It's a stepping stone to deeper space.
It is no longer a dream, but a reality.
Welcome to the moon, Houston. We leave as we came, with peace and in hope for all mankind.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me get a crazy amount of noise because this is Tom Jennings and Mike Massimino right now. Come on. Come on. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here and joining us and hanging out. Mike, welcome back. It's great to have you on the stage once again.
Thanks for having us here.
As I was saying backstage, I was thoroughly excited when I found out you were at the helm because of your knack, the way in which you tell stories, your use of archival footage. To see this story through that lens was particularly exciting for me. How long did this take you, sir? This must have been a tough one.
I think it was a lifetime in the making, I gotta tell you. It's I've been fascinated by the story ever since I was very young. But working with National Geographic, this took about 18 months to do from beginning to end, from concept to finishing the master and delivery. And it's very exciting because, it's the 50th anniversary and there are a lot of programs coming out dealing with the 50th anniversary, but we're the only one that uses this format, and we go from Sputnik to the space shuttle, and everything in between. So for people who remember, it's going to bring up a lot of things that they perhaps have forgotten, and for people who don't know the story, it's a terrific primer that by the time you're done, you're going to get a sense of what it was like to be there.
That's exactly it. You get a sense of what it was like to be there. Gentlemen, keep me honest. I was doing some math. I think, Mike, you were, I want to say 7 at the time of the initial launch, give or take?
Almost 6.
You were 6, almost 7, and then you were 7. You were 7. Do you have, I know it's a tough thing to answer and think back on, but do you have memories of that moment? Do you remember what you were doing or when you saw it, even though you were so little? Did it imprint at all?
Yeah, no, it's actually pretty easy for me to answer it. It changed my life. Seeing this, and I was only 6, right? But it's I think it's the first, we were talking about this. There's other things I can remember, little events here and there, Santa Claus or whatever. But I think there's like the first story I remember following, like the first news event, and I very clearly remember at that time thinking that this was the most important thing that is going to happen ever. At the time we were learning about the explorers 500 years earlier, and I thought that this was equivalent to that. That was the big thing we learned about, but it happened 500 years ago, and 500 years from now, my thinking when I was 6 years old, people are going to learn about this. This is going to mark our time. It's the time that we first left the planet, and I thought this was the most important thing happening. And the astronauts were, Neil Armstrong was my all-time hero. I like Michael Collins because we shared the same first name. As a little kid, I thought that was important. And I wanted to grow up to be an astronaut. I also got the sense that it meant more to me. I knew it meant everything. It meant a lot to everyone at that time, but I kind of got the sense that it meant a little bit more to me than it did others, and I think that's true. It captured me.
I was kind of hoping for that answer. As someone who's gone to space, I figured it had to be important. Like you became an astronaut, so obviously it meant something to you. When you were up there, did you ever have a moment to sort of reflect and realize, I did it? I can't believe it feels like yesterday I was 6 years old watching this on TV, and now here I am floating around working on this telescope and like.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I still can't believe I had a chance to go. It was a very personal, important dream to me as a very little boy. Like your little childhood dream, and I didn't think about it much. After about the age of 8, I realized I could never do that. That's just like impossible. Could never happen. I didn't think about it again, really, even a career with the space program until after I got out of college. And when I was a senior in college, I went and saw the movie The Right Stuff, and that rekindled that. Those dreams are buried, and they're inside of me because I just denied that it could ever happen, and I thought, no, I can never do that. It's impossible. And I went and saw that movie. And then got the book, that Tom Wolfe's book, and read the book and saw the movie over and over again on VCR tape. And it rekindled that dream. And then I finally decided I was going to do something about it. And a few years after working after college, I went to grad school to pursue it. But I did. I have a picture. My mom took this picture of me in the backyard dressed up as an astronaut with my astronaut Snoopy. And if you see this, it's in my book. This picture of me. It's on you don't have to buy the book. It's on the cover of the paperback.
You can buy the book.
You can. You don't need to. It's also in the library.
You don't have to, but you could.
Sorry, but I don't want to promote the book. But the picture, if you see it, I'm wearing a gray astronaut costume, because she converted a costume I had for the first grade play. It was an elephant in a first grade play, and she converted to this astronaut because I wanted to be an astronaut, and I'm holding my astronaut Snoopy with me. Well, I hung on to Snoopy. And I was on my second space flight. I took them with me. So I have this picture, these two pictures. One of me as a little boy, 6 years old, holding Snoopy, dressed up like Neil Armstrong, and one other with me, floating on the space shuttle with Earth in the background with the same Snoopy. So yes, it was extremely meaningful to me, and it's one of those things you think back to your little childhood dreams, and sometimes they come true.
I'm just saying there are worse books you could buy.
Thank you very much for the plug. We're not here to plug the book. We're here to plug Tom's, Tom's show, Tom's movie.
Tom, you were, I think we said you were 7 at the time. Do you have any memories of that moment, sitting on a carpet watching a TV, I assume?
I have better memories of Apollo 8, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah, funny enough. The reason was, Jim Lovell, who's on Apollo 8, is from my hometown of Cleveland, Ohio. And so it was huge news in Cleveland when he went up. It was huge news everywhere because Apollo 8 was the first time that we got outside Earth's orbit and went around the moon. And Apollo 8 was having what they called the Christmas Eve broadcast. And I remember I had walked to the store a couple blocks from my house, when a little kid would do that. And it was in the evening, and it was really cold in Cleveland on Christmas Eve that night. And I remember looking up at the moon and then looking down the street to where my house was, and I thought, I have to get home so I can watch those guys up there in my living room down here, and trying to make sense of it as a little kid and that wonder of it, and the magic of it. And I started to believe that we could do anything. There was this sense of All things were possible for a little kid. And I remembered that all throughout my life, even before I started making this film. And when we got the chance to do it, I wanted to, in some ways, create that magic again for myself. So that was the one that I remember most because I was in such a hurry to get home before the broadcast started. And fortunately, I did.
Well, let me ask you a question about that magic, because we were just talking about this in the green room. I always thought over time we as a culture have become jaded. It's become commonplace. Oh, we've been to the moon, old hat. But I was fascinated to see, from the broadcasts of the day, from man-on-the-street interviews, from that time, that people really didn't care from Apollo 11 to Apollo 12. It just dropped off. One, did you have a recollection of that magic shifting or of the culture shifting then? And two, when you did this film, were you like, oh, that's right. I was a little kid. I was still caught up in it, but the world was not in alignment with what I was thinking. Like,
you know what I remembered in going through all the footage, what it reminded me of was, yes, there was a drop-off, and it was partly because of the media attention. There was so much attention, and we put it in the film where 11, the press room, there were thousands and thousands of reporters from all over the world, and by 12, and then 13 before they had the problem, the NASA PR people were saying, where's all the coverage? It just had gone away. There were other things happening in the world at the time that we shifted our focus to. And so looking back on it now and looking at the footage, I can recall how it just didn't seem to be as important in the day-to-day coverage and headlines of the newspapers at the time. So that's an accurate, it's surprising when you think, well, we went to the moon again. It's like, isn't that enough? Isn't it a magic, a miracle almost? And
it's a miracle of science and a testament to our ingenuity and our creativity. Yeah, it's fine.
But I think that's okay. I think that even because I can remember, I kind of, not that I lost interest, I think I still followed, but it wasn't like Apollo 11. There's no first time on the moon. And I think that is, I don't think it's so much that what they did after was boring or commonplace, because it was, they got better and better at what they were doing. Apollo 11, 12, and 13 all trained for the same mission, from what those guys have told me. Alan Bean on Apollo 12 said that they were all training in case 11 didn't make it. Attempt 2 was going to be 12. Attempt 3 was 13. But Apollo 11 made it, so they quickly had to figure out something to do on Apollo 12. And what they did is they landed very close to Surveyor, which was already a spacecraft on the moon. So they wanted to see how they could pinpoint land. And they got more and more ambitious. The rover came around the later flights. They started doing spacewalks on the way home to retrieve experiments. They really got bold at what they were doing, spent more time on the moon and so on. So what they did was a great accomplishment. So I don't think it's so much saying we were bored with what those guys were doing. I think it's just so colossal of the achievement of Apollo 11. And that it's more, I think, what they did, the first time we left the planet and landed someplace else. And that'll never happen again. I don't think anything we do will ever top that. And I really don't. I don't, people go, oh, we have the space station, people have been a long time. Even going to Mars.
You think Mars
I
would do it?
I don't think it's going to be as big a deal as Apollo 11 was. I don't. I think a lot of people think we've already been to Mars because of the movies.
Fair enough.
Right? So I think that's part of our problem. Like, you haven't been there yet? I thought you went there already. So and I think there's probably a degree of that. But just like some of my relatives think I went to the moon, which I didn't. But I don't think that...
See, some of your relatives think you went to the moon?
Yeah, but that's a whole nother topic. We don't want to get into that.
In your
we don't
family,
want to disappoint
they don't
them.
know?
Well, we had to straighten them out. They're like, you went to the moon. They're like, no, I didn't go to the moon. I just went to Hubble. So I think sometimes people, I think, what am I saying here? I got sidetracked. I think no, it's fine. I think I did it to myself. I think Apollo 11 was that big of an achievement that it stands alone, and it's going to be hard to top forever. I don't know what in my opinion, that event, I don't know what could top it. Discovering life on another place, right. I think will do it.
Yeah.
That might take a very long time, but I think that's okay. I don't think it's that everything else we've done in space doesn't matter. I think that means that's how important that achievement was.
Not to go like too far down that path or off the rails here, but because I was interested in that exact question of what would it take, do you think, to reunite us in that same way?
I don't know. We went through so much footage from the day of the moon landing, and the world literally stopped. I mean, we use a lot of it in the film, but everything shut down. People were like parked at red lights when with the radio on, listening, and it happened in every country that had access to the media. One thing here in New York that I didn't know about, they had a moon in Central Park. It's in the film. They put up like jumbo screens in Central Park, and it was pouring rain. And we found images of people with like tarps over their head, watching the moon landing in Central Park with a shot of the moon. Whoever the photographer was did a great job above them. Yeah. And so they too, like I did with 8, they were looking up and then watching the screen. Everything stopped. And we were talking recently about whether or not when we land on Mars, because we've already landed there in a sense, but when we put people there, will it stop the world the same way? And I don't think it will.
Tom, how do you make narrative decisions in terms of what to include, what not to include? Because like it took Ron Howard like nearly 3 hours to tell me about Apollo 13. You knocked it out in like 20 minutes, and I thought it was great. How do you make those calls when you only have so much space to tell so much history?
It's very complicated, especially with using archive footage, because we can't go and shoot something, but we want to make it look like we did. We're trying to make it look like we went out and filmed all of this material ourselves 50 years ago. And how we do it is we pick the pillars of the story that we have to tell, and we zero in the footage on each of those, and then we create characters that we want to follow. So, for example, if we were doing 11, it would just be Neil and Buzz, for example, and Michael Collins. But the astronauts became a character, and then the astronauts' families were a character, and then Mission Control was a character. We build it like a feature film, and then we find footage that speaks to those storylines, and they weave in and out, and that's how we do it. And so we keep it locked down, because otherwise we would go crazy. We go crazy anyway, but we have a template that we apply, almost the hero's journey kind of template of storytelling, and it works. And as long as we keep our eye on that goal, it works. And 13 is the same way. We have a limited amount of time. We know what the beats are. We have to look for the emotional moments, which we found. And hopefully we can do it in one act of a 9-act television show.
How giddy do you get when you stumble upon a piece of footage or audio that can draw a direct like parallel or connection today to modern times? There's like a bit about the London Flat Earther Society having to reconsider their position in light of Apollo 11. There's that great interview with Poppy, the first female engineer to work in the control room, and they ask her what's it like being in a male-dominated world, and she's like, well, it's really dominated by computers. And she has this great... When you find those little bits that like bring it right into modern times and it makes it so prescient, what does that feel like when you stumble upon that?
Oh, it feels like, we found gold in the mine, because we literally, when we do these archive programs, it's like the last scene of Indiana Jones. We're going into these vast archives, going through boxes, and then when you finally find something that connects a story from 50 years ago in a way that makes complete sense and relevance to today, that's staying in.
That's in the movie.
The hard part of doing all of this is what to leave out, but the relevant stuff stays in because it makes a connection for people that wouldn't otherwise know what to think of this kind of story.
Mike, when you were working at NASA, did you have access to those archives? Like, because I know you guys put a lot of work into marrying audio and footage that hasn't been presented in that way before, at least to the public. Did you ever have, like, on your off hours while you were at NASA, if such a thing exists, did you ever go to, like, the NASA library? I'm making things up. Is this a thing? Would you go to the NASA library? And would you go there and just kind of look through the archives and look at the old stuff?
I didn't. And I think one of the great things that Tom and his team did was find these pieces of footage and these stories that I never knew about. And the only way you have to have someone who really knows how to go through that stuff. So no, our relationship with it was more from the Apollo astronauts and the Gene Kranz and those guys coming back and telling us stories about what it was like so we could learn from them in what we were doing. And I think I got to see the Moon Rock Lab. That's pretty cool. They have the Rock Lab down in Houston. So, but no, I never looked through the Apollo 11 archives. You need experts to do that. So,
I imagine it's daunting. It's got to be mountains and mountains and stuff.
So much stuff that they recorded, and they did that, and then they had to move on to the next flight. And It's just so much stuff.
And there's more and more stuff being digitized. You know, we've been very lucky in the last year that NASA has put something like 10,000 new photos, new in that they haven't been digitized or online. Anybody can go and look at their archive. I think they might have a Flickr page where you can go and start looking at some of this stuff. And a lot of the audio from Mission Control has not been digitized before. There's something called a 30 track. You know, all those guys that you see, and a few women who were there, they're talking. In the past, when you would see documentary films, there'd be one guy you'd hear, which is called Capcom, the capsule communicator, talking with the astronauts.
I did, yeah. We called it spacecraft communicator, though.
I know.
They even though it's Capcom, they called it, there's a story there because
There
they
is
didn't
a
want,
story,
they
yeah.
didn't want the spacecraft. They didn't like the idea that it was called a capsule. But so that position where you talk with you're the capsule communicator, and then they changed the name, but they kept the acronym. So it's spacecraft communicator Capcom.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
Well,
you.
yeah,
Yeah, I got to do
the
that.
quick ending is that those 30 tracks, you can imagine 30 people talking at the same time for each of the manned missions, which would last up to maybe 200 hours, are now being digitized. And we can marry that with the footage that used to be a silent film inside Mission Control. And when you put the actual audio together with the people, the images of the people, all of a sudden everything comes to life. It completely changes the experience. It's a really exciting thing.
You know, one thing in that area about looking for things, if people are interested, there's a website, images.nasa.gov. I don't. You guys probably have better places to go in your professional capacity, but there's when I need an image, that's where I go. Images, and that, as Tom's saying, it's been an effort that they've done over the past couple of years to start to get all that stuff online and available to the public. And sometimes it's easier for me to find a piece of video I'm looking for or an image to go there than through the stuff that I have from my flights, my own personal collection of images that was given to me that we took on our flight. So I think they're getting better and better at that, but there's just so much of it that's going to take a long time.
Just so much data and content. We're going to go to the audience in just a second, take some questions. But the last thing I wanted to ask, literally yesterday, I believe Mission Dragonfly was announced, and we're sending a drone, looks like, to Titan, which is incredible. We have recently the Artemis mission. We're going to have the first female set foot on the lunar surface. Very exciting. There's so much. The Navy, we're inching towards disclosure and how they report UFOs. There's so much going on right now. There's a New York Times article about how they address and report UFOs. So much crazy stuff. What do you hope to see in your lifetime? You've witnessed this. You've made this film. What do you want to see? What could be the greatest thing before the time is up for you guys that you want to see in your lifetime that we could achieve or have happen?
Well, E.T.
Yeah, that's right. That's it. That's the goal.
I think that's it'd be great to go back to deep space to see what when you start to think about. We were talking about this. So when you start to think about how far space is and the number of hundreds of millions of light years, it starts to almost, in me anyway, I start to get very anxious because it's like, how far is far anymore? And so I think if we could connect with whatever might be out there, that would be something I hope to live to see.
I very much understand that. I'm that way. I am fascinated by all of this. I'm in love with all of this. I can't get enough of it. But when I think too much about space or the vastness, I get very anxious. My friends make fun of me because I'm not afraid of scary movies or horror movies. Aliens terrify me. I want to know, but if they show up, that's it. We're done. What do we do? They're aliens. It's game over. So that keeps me up at night sometimes. But I still also I'd like to know in my lifetime. What about you, Mike? What do you want to see before?
Well, I think I think it's time for us to go back to the moon. Since we went to the moon with people, right? We've been to the moon with spacecraft that no people are on board, and we've learned a lot about the moon and about Mars and about you mentioned these other missions that are out there without people. But as far as with people, which I think is most interesting, where we can go. Since the moon missions, we've been in low Earth orbit and have learned how to live for long periods of time in low Earth orbit, but that's different than living on a planetary surface. If you look at the history of exploration, going to the poles about 100 years ago, North and South Pole, they found them, and then they went home. And it was about another 50 years until they set up a research station in Antarctica that was international and is still thriving. I think that's where we should be looking at now, 50 years later. Going back to the moon, settling there with a research facility, maybe with a resource facility where we can use the resources on the moon to launch to go to other places. Maybe a little tourism in there. Maybe that might work. Why not? And then eventually on to Mars. But I think the moon seems to be the next place for us to combine our ability to get there, which we've done before, with our ability to keep people in space for longer periods of time. The ET thing, that my missions to Hubble has found that the universe is so much bigger than we thought, and it keeps getting bigger because about a year ago it came out from some Hubble data that the universe was 10% larger than we thought it was previously. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger, right? It's just we don't even know. It's beyond. There are trillions of galaxies with billions of stars in each, most of which have multiple planets orbiting around them. So I don't think we've ever been visited I don't think there's real evidence of that, but I do believe that there's life other places, and I think we will find each other. It's just that, as you say, the distances. We checked out our neighborhood. There's probably nothing around here, right? It's all there's nobody around here that we know of. But there may be signs of something under the Martian surface of microbial life, but there's probably nothing on running around on the surface from what we could tell, or anywhere in our solar system. But I think the odds are there has to be something somewhere else. But wherever they are, they're far from us. We're far from them. We have to figure out a way to connect, and that may take a couple hundred years. So I'm not looking. I would love to see that happen, but I would like to see us be able to travel more quickly to get to places, or figure out ways to see what's out there. And we're getting better at that with AI and big data and stuff like that. But I think getting back to the moon is something I would like to see in my lifetime. I think the thriving, or the hopefully soon thriving, commercial space business with the privatization, Blue Origin, SpaceX, Virgin Galactic, I think within the next 10 years, we can see a lot of people experiencing space travel, the International Space Station being turned over to commercial space, so that NASA and the other countries can think about the bigger things, about maybe working with some industry too, of going to the moon and Mars. So I think maybe out of all of that, the thing to hope for in the near term within my lifetime is to see a thriving commercial space business, because
you buying a ticket?
We're going to get there.
I
want to get a comp ticket if I can.
You get a comp?
I'm not buying.
You should,
no,
right?
I mean, unless the price really comes down, yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't. I want to go back as a tourist, though.
Yeah.
I think that would be a fun thing to do.
Really appreciate the sights. Yeah. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. We got to take some questions from the world outside here. We got from Twitter. This is at KikiCatXOXO. Love it. Hey guys, with advances in technology, what do you think we would learn if we went back to the moon?
I think we would. I think overall, with now this going back to the moon with people, of course, right? So, I think we would learn how to exist on another planetary surface for a long period of time, right? So, what can we do about providing food, water, radiation protection? How do we deal with rocks and dust and a little bit of gravity? 1/6 gravity versus 0. So, I think that's we would learn how to live there. I think we would also learn what is there that we might be able to use, the resources there, energy sources that we might be able to use it as a launching pad to go other places. And I think it would also give us a very nice perch to study the heavens, and also to study our planet as well. So I think all those things are worthwhile. I think it would be an international cooperative effort, which is always a good thing, so we can learn how to get along with our friends a little bit better, or other countries. But I think primarily it's getting people off the planet, and how we can do that, and how maybe we can use the moon as a springboard to go other places. I mean, to me, it seems like that's why it's there. Right. It's in orbit with us. It follows us. It's like a little brother or sister. And it's always, whereas Mars is sometimes on the other side of the sun. And so I think the moon is there for us to explore and use it as a launching pad to go other places.
It's a great question. Thank you for that. I'm getting a signal. I got two in the room, so let's go ahead first with a microphone. Where are you at? There you are.
Hello. So my question is for Mike. I was just wondering what the hardest part was about being in space, and what was the first thing you did when you came home?
The hardest thing, there's a lot, on like a work side of it, there's just a lot going on, and you want to make sure you keep up with everything and do the best job you can, and so it's a bit stressful, and the getting into the launch is a bit stressful, and in your spacewalks you want to do a good job, so that's that. But overall, it's you're ready to go, and the experience is just so extraordinary. So there really isn't much that is unpleasant. It is just a lot of work, and you want to keep on top of it. But it's just an extraordinary experience. So you miss your family and your friends, and miss home a little bit. So the first thing I did when I got home was see my family and order a pizza. In fact, I ordered, because you didn't get pizza. Now they have some kind of makeshift pizza up there. I don't trust it, but apparently, they've got. I haven't heard much about it since its initial trial, but we don't have pizza in space, and I missed it, and I actually ordered a pizza from orbit through email to make sure it's going to be waiting for us. So that's the thing I missed the most. Baseball scores I was able to get from my friends. They would tell me what was going on, baseball-wise and other things I was interested in. But you miss your family, and you miss little things that your favorite things you might not be able to get in space. But being there is totally worth it. So.
Did you sent, for those that aren't aware, the first human to tweet from space, from orbit, did you do that through email as well, or how did that work?
I got to send the first tweet from space. Take that, Neil Armstrong. And I did that it was back then, we did not have a direct internet connection. Now they do. Now you can surf the internet and send email and receive email. It's slow, it's like an old dial-up from the old AOL days, right? But now it's so it's slow, but it's still it works. And back then we didn't have that. We had a mail sync that would go down usually in the morning and evening, where all your mail would go down, all it would come up, all your pictures would go down, all the news would come up, and all that. Twice a day was a big sync. But that's what I did. I sent it in the form of an email, then it went out as a tweet.
Very cool. Do we have time for one more? I'd love to get one more question.
Hi. I know you guys worked with a lot of old types of media. Did you guys ever have any technical difficulties where you weren't able to get something that you really wanted into the movie because it was just unusable?
No, we were able to get pretty much everything we wanted. The frustrating part was we would hear stories about footage that had existed at one time that no one can find anymore. And a brief story, my favorite is the BBC coverage the day of the moon landing. They were covering it live, and the BBC was very experimental at that time. Their tapes have not been seen in decades. No one knows if they were taped over, lost, or if someone took them home. They brought the band Pink Floyd into the studio, if you can imagine this. And this was before they really made it big. Pink Floyd was still kind of a London psychedelic band. And they played in the background as the lunar module was coming down to land on the surface of the moon. And it's a song called Moonhead that they played once in concert about 6 months later. And there's a bootleg of it out there somewhere. But no one's seen the tape of Pink Floyd on the BBC during the landing of Apollo 11 in about 4 decades. So my dream in doing archive footage is to be the person who finds the BBC footage from that day. But as of now, it's missing. Most of the stuff is preserved enough or we can deal with it, but then you hear these stories about other things that have existed in the past, and that's one that we would have loved to have found.
Thank you for that. That's a pretty wild thing. The BBC, that's actually, with Doctor Who, that's a big issue with some of the earlier seasons and episodes, is that they've been lost because they just didn't archive. They're like, nobody cares. This thing's on every day. They just didn't save stuff back then. Well, it's like,
and
now you got everything.
Now everything's saved, but one of the tricks we use is local news footage. So it's not all Walter Cronkite. We use local news footage from Florida, from Houston, from Ohio, to try and give the story a fresh feel with new people. But especially the local affiliates, they would tape over stuff because tape was expensive. They threw it away. Some places keep everything, and other places have thrown everything out. And just very quickly, when a camera operator goes out to shoot anything, even today, they have like 30-minute loads, they call them, so they're shooting for 30 minutes. It goes back to a newsroom. Some editor shuffles through it, picks the favorite 4 or 5 minutes that they're going to use in the broadcast. It's always how it's been done. The tape comes out of the machine, and 25 minutes of really great stuff is gone. And so when we go and look for this stuff, we say, we don't want the cut piece that went on the air. We want the raw tapes. I want to see the other 25 minutes because there's entire worlds there.
Kind of like when you find I'm sorry, this might sound stupid, but it reminds me of like when I find an old tape of something we filmed, like when we used to tape shows on television and we didn't skip the commercials. It's like at the time we didn't want the commercials. I just want to watch this episode of The Simpsons again later. But now it's like, oh my God, I remember that commercial for Pizza Hut. I was 3 at the time. Like, there's all these fun things that you leave it in there. You don't realize it, but in time, that stuff that you thought was useless is the gold. Like, that's where all the good stuff
Put
is.
you in the time and place like nothing else.
Exactly. Gentlemen, I got to wrap things up, but it was an absolute honor to have you both here on this stage. Mike, it's great to have you back, Tom. It's so cool to hang out and talk to you about this film. I'll remind the world that it premieres National Geographic July 7th. I want to say 9, 8 Central. Apollo Missions to the Moon, Sunday, July 7th, 9, 8 Central. Do not miss it, guys. It is not a show. It's an experience. It's incredible. You've never seen it like this. It's so, so cool. And everybody, please make an appropriate amount of noise to join me in thanking the great Mike Massimino and Tom Jennings for being here. Thank you, guys. Thank you.